Well, the best team won, and that team was not Best Virginia, as Best Virginia's run through the TBT comes to an end in Dayton. We do have our Ethan Bock of WV Sports now live, still bearing with me here through some technical difficulties on location. And Dayton's Red Scare gets the victory 67-60. Elam ending victor over Best Virginia to eliminate James Long's team, John Flowers and company, end their run through the TBT. I'm Mike Asti, and of course, this is our post-game show from the TBT. That's all, folks. We did a show a couple nights ago. They heard that. They got through the Charleston region. It seemed like this number one seed was headed to winning that $1 million, to winning a championship, and it appeared like they had the most talent and they were going to get it done. But really, from the jump of this game against the Red Scare, it looked like they were against a team that was very evenly matched with them. They had that real bad second period, which ends up just kind of like killing the entire game. And they were trading baskets, but it just wasn't enough at the end. So, Ethan, before we get to the game, what's the feeling? What's the tone? Obviously, a little somber in comparison to the last couple games when we talked to you and the jubilation that was around this team. Is there kind of a feeling like maybe they let one get away and this is the championship that maybe should have been won? Is there disappointment? What's the vibe right now?
A little disappointed, but at the same time, I think they're proud of how far they went this year in the tournament. So furthest the team has went since they started competing in 2019.
Yeah.
Last year they made it to the Sweet 16. This year they make it to the Elite Eight. So why not potentially run it back in 2023?
Yeah, I guess that's definitely a glass half full way to look at it, for sure. And they did big things this year, especially in comparison to the prior tournaments. They were the number one seed this year. So you feel like the path is theirs. Did Dayton and their fans have an impact in this game? Because they were vocal on Twitter, at least. It looked like they felt like they were unfairly placed as a 3 seed. It looked like a lot of their fans felt like they were the best team in this tournament and they were at home, and this was not going to be easy for Best Virginia, and it ended up not being easy, and they ended up losing. So was there a fan impact at all there being live in attendance?
Yeah, I would say this is the best atmosphere Best Virginia's played in ever in TBT. This is the first road game they've had since 2019. They didn't play in 2020, 2021, and 2022. They play in West Virginia, and then this was the first game in 3 years that they're playing outside of the state. So, and Dayton's fans are incredible. Like,
yeah,
they packed the house, the lower bowl, for a game in college basketball. It really was a college basketball game in July tonight. And James Long talked about it. Like, this environment really felt like a college basketball game, a conference game in February. It was insane. West Virginia, there wasn't much else West Virginia could have done to silence the crowd.
Yeah, Ethan Bock here joining me from WV Sports now. He is still there in Dayton. West Virginia does lose, and they get eliminated in the TBT as the Dayton Red Scare advance on. And actually, it's a fan base that's really, really hungry and almost maybe deserved in a weird way, because you bring up 2020 when West Virginia did not compete in this tournament, the only year they didn't compete. And that's the year that Dayton and their fans felt like they had that elusive national championship kind of right in front of them, and then it got ripped away and they didn't even get a chance to complete. It wasn't like they got upset in a tournament. It was just ripped away because of the coronavirus. So this obviously wouldn't be that, but their fans want to lift some type of trophy, and they haven't been nearly as good the last couple of years since that season in terms of the college team. So we'll see what this Red Scare can do as they do advance on 67-60. Again, the win over West Virginia. Now, you mentioned talking to James Long. He was the only post-game presser after this, a little different than all the celebration and having John Flowers with his little daughter there and chugging the E&J brandy. Didn't happen here after this loss. But what did he say that maybe stood out to you? Did he say anything that stood out to you outside of just being disappointed? Any thoughts on anything he did say after this game, which obviously is a heartbreaking loss for him?
Just what stood out to me was him talking about the rebounding. They had rebounding issues in Charleston. We knew going into this game that if West Virginia couldn't rebound the ball, especially not allow offensive rebounds, that it was going to be an issue. And it showed tonight. They got out rebounded. They allowed 16 offensive rebounds.
Right. Yeah. It does it go back to not only the rebounding, but this game was so highly contested defensively early on. John Flowers hits that big three early. It's kind of back and forth as well until you're getting to the end there where the Red Scare does enough to hang on with the Elam ending victory. But what happened in that second period that if you just look at the box score now, you're kind of seeing that, okay, it was pretty tight all the way through. And then there's that big differential, 19-12, I believe, without looking at it. That's just the problem. That ends up being the differential in the loss, actually. Did they just get cold?
Yeah, I would say so. The crowd really got amped up. I'm not exaggerating about the crowd. Yeah. Every time Jawan Staten touched the ball, it was all boos.
I saw that. Yeah.
Anytime they hit a big shot, a three, a dunk, a block, especially in the second half, the crowd just erupted. And West Virginia tried their best to silence it. Jamel Morris hit a couple shots in the fourth quarter that quieted them for a little bit, but 20 seconds later, they're up and cheering again. You would have thought there's 13,000 people in here.
Yeah, and it's interesting how those fans, and of course the fans of these teams in the TBT are really fans of the college team that they're so closely associated with and where most of the players come from, but to still be in their feelings about Staten so many years later, that's just crazy. And that's what you do get out of this tournament. Now, obviously, this is further than West Virginia has been in the previous attempts at this tournament. They still, I'm sure, want that championship. We didn't get to hear from the elder statesmen of this team that are so vocal and kind of been promoting this team as well, mentioning John Flowers so much, but not even just him, Kevin Jones, you mentioned Staten, Ebanks, etc. Any feeling on how many of them want to do this again, will be asked to do this again? Does James Long want to do this again? Is he going to be asked to do this again? Obviously, you're ending on a positive note for the team and the program based on the prior tournament runs, this being the best, but they are the number one seed. So this feels like an upset, even though you're in a road environment and maybe it feels like a championship they kind of let slip away. What do you think about the next run and what that team will look like in comparison to, say, this team projecting a year from now?
James Long, after the game, he didn't know what the future held with him coming back, but basically in the locker room they just talked about, whatever happens next year happens, but West Virginia will continue to play on regardless. If it's a younger team next year, you bring in younger alumni, but no matter what, those guys in the locker room that played their hearts out for the state the last week, they're going to be cheering on that team regardless if they're playing or not.
Yeah, and it goes to the family atmosphere we talked about after they won the Charleston region. And anyone watching this here, just go back to that show. I'm not going to recycle that conversation, but talking about the family atmosphere, the former players, the current players, Huggins watching on, cheering on this team, that connection, maybe even what that potentially could do for recruiting, all of that definitely makes some sense and is still going to be a part of this. And West Virginia has now become a staple team really in the TBT. So maybe it'll be a different group, maybe it'll be a different head coach, but certainly going to be a team. They're not going to fold as a program overall. Certainly after this type of run and wanting to go one step further, you do mention the next step is that Final Four again, where some of these players certainly have been before, even though it was a decade plus ago in the NCAA tournament of March Madness. Just, having some fun here since we're doing this now in the wee hours of the morning, and probably nobody's still catching us live after our technical difficulties. Wasn't our best night either here at WV Sports now, I'll admit, and pull the curtain back either. So we didn't really get a win either. But just hypothetically, if James Long is not back, do you have a name in mind that maybe could do this, that maybe isn't currently coaching high-level college basketball or NBA basketball that would be available and would want to do this, or just someone that maybe you think would be cool in the role? And maybe some other players that if there's roster spots that are open, what are some former players or some players that you think maybe could fit into this TBT environment and could be on this team that have yet to play for West Virginia?
Long isn't available, and Jawan Staten doesn't want to play, you
Right.
call Jawan Staten the coach. He's
Okay.
now the head coach of a prep school in Ohio, in Dayton, Ohio, actually.
Okay.
So he's dipping his toes in the head coaching role. So I think he would be a guy to call. Deshaun Butler, if he's available. I don't
Right.
know. I don't know if his availability next year, because he'll be still coaching with the G League Hawks team probably. But I think Jawan Staten, just a young head coach entering his first year ever as a head coach. I think you ask him if James Long can't return. And players wise, yeah,
One name that comes to mind, and this is even a little bit before my time, but I did get him a little bit, when I was first starting college. I'm a little older than you. And this is just a guy that really nobody knows what he's doing as much, but certainly was a star player on an NCAA tournament run or two for West Virginia, kind of the beginning of this run. Prior to Huggins, it was the John Beilein era with Kevin Pittsnoggle. I know he's tried his craft with different really minor league versions of pro ball with a team called the Pittsburgh Explosion many years ago, for a random fact, but not really doing much else basketball wise. Could you convince him to cherry pick some threes out there? Could he still run up and down the court? Is he still in shape to do it? I don't know. That's just a name that I think would be cool for Mountaineer fans, be older fans, to see out there. It doesn't have to be the Huggins group. There's no rule that it has to be Huggins players. So that's one that could be cool. I don't know, even going further than that, Gansey, players like that. Are there any rules that restrict anybody if they happen to be free, even if they're doing anything else in basketball, coaching or playing, if they could do this? It doesn't appear so. So that's just a name that right now comes to mind, as I think fans would like to see out there. I don't know if that would necessarily be helpful or not, and if he can play or not, or when the last time he's been shooting in the Y or not. But any other names, maybe any more recent names you can think of that you like to see in the TBT?
recently for sure Gabe Savoyan. I mean, they
Right.
pitched it to him
Okay.
this offseason. He was busy with NBA workouts and stuff.
Right.
Who knows? He
He's a
still
big fan of the team. He was a big supporter, very
Yeah, he
vocal about
showed
being
he
a fan
showed
of the
up
team.
every single game in
Right.
Charleston.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you know how much he loves the state of West Virginia too. I'm
Yeah.
sure he'd love to play in this tournament. But his name's first that comes up. I think
Figuring Deuce McBride is going to be, I would imagine at this point next summer, he's probably, you would think, done with Summer League and maybe actually getting on an NBA roster.
mhm.
Maybe not, if not doing Summer League again, but certainly showed out on Summer League for the Knicks, and maybe going to finally get some more PT this coming season, or maybe he'll be involved in a trade, because that's a rumor, and maybe he'll get more time in Utah or wherever else. So maybe he's done with Summer League, but feeling like he's probably above a level of a TBT now. Certainly Javon Carter is. He's entrenched in the NBA community. But it will be interesting if you get anybody else, or what the team looks like, or who else maybe would go to this team if it is not James Long. And also you got to think, they're not going to fire anybody who just goes to Elite Eight in the TBT, for crying out loud. But maybe these guys, they have lives, they have kids. John Flowers is a real estate agent. James Long does other things. Maybe they just want to take a year off. Maybe they don't want to do it. I mean, maybe they want to support the team, but not, it's still a 2 or 3 week long journey with some travel, where you are playing and going home and getting home at 1 a.m. They're a little older now to be doing that. So you don't know how much longer they want to do this, or how much longer they want to compete in this, figuring that if they do, they want to win that championship, which takes them to at least a couple weeks through. So that'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, even consider guys that played last year that couldn't play this year, like
Right.
Tariq Phillip, Nate Adrian, just to name a few. Everybody, they're, like I said, I told you the other day, they're all
Yeah.
about family. They always work out with each other in summers. I'm sure whoever's GM next year, whether that's Kevin or John, I'm sure they'll put together a fine roster.
Yeah, because they're not going to do it unless they want to try to win this whole thing. And that's really the next step, getting to that Final Four and then winning this whole thing. They do derail themselves in the Elite Eight here, as Best Virginia loses to the Dayton Red Scare. It is the Dayton team. It was in Dayton, so it was a road game, even though the number 1 seed does fall in the TBT. It won't be $1 million. It won't be a championship for Best Virginia, even though they kind of stabilized themselves and did win the Charleston region to definitely say they are the best of the West Virginia or Virginia teams. So they at least got that going for them and continue those bragging rights. Ethan, we definitely appreciate the time, definitely appreciate the coverage, definitely appreciate fighting through the connection issues as we kind of had a rough night as well in comparison to the team. They certainly, I'm sure, wish they could have this game back and this night back or maybe play it somewhere else. Maybe it would have been a different result. But nonetheless, I think the TBT is a win for the program, for the players, for the team, for the coach, for the WVU, West Virginia University program, really the future of that. And certainly people rooting on the fans that were there in Charleston, even went to Dayton. And then, even people covering it. I mean, it's not even just us. I mean, all of media that covers West Virginia, WVU, cover this thing, and you get highlights on the TV stations locally. So that's a big deal. And that's a jump from where the TBT started even a few years ago when West Virginia was a part of it right away. So that's all a win, even though they don't come away with $1 million or the championship. Find us at WV Sports Now for the coverage, for the post-game reaction, for this show, for all of it. And then, of course, go there for the rest of our coverage of WVU.